Let me get this straight. A Chinese company, a hedge fund, releases a new model, makes a bunch of claims. The American markets take these claims at face value and lose $1 trillion.
It should not be shocking to any of our listeners or us. Everything is just meme driven. If all of your value is driven by memes and the memes shift on you, it's all just made up.
Here we are in the meme economy moving $1 trillion. And so the thing that kept running in my mind as this was all going down is, do they even need TikTok to hurt us? They just need memes.
It just keeps getting more entertaining because now all these AI people, they're claiming that like it was lifted out of their model. You distilled the entire internet to build your thing.
Yeah, totally.
You can't be mad.
Well, hello, friends. Welcome to this week's More or Less. I'm Jessica without a voice lesson, here with Dave, Morin, Sam, also under the weather lesson, and Brit's down. She has the flu.
Brit's down for the count. Everyone has the flu right now, it seems like.
Who's going to do Pop Culture Corner?
Guys, I'll try. I mean, the Taylor Travis, football love. Dave, you could bring us there, but I mean, we couldn't go quiet. We couldn't leave the airwaves.
No, not this week.
Not this week. I mean, guys, do you remember, I was on Peter Kafka's podcast Channels, which everyone should listen to. And I was referencing in past Meta's content moderation overhaul, which but 10 days ago was major news that they were wanting it back. And now it just seems like the least significant thing, not significant, but just so much has happened. Does it feel that way outside of the newsroom?
Yeah.
I don't know.
News metabolism, incredibly fast. It's crazy. I was wondering if you were going to get back to that anytime, Jess. You were pretty fired up.
I'm fired about everything right now.
Just bury news and more news. This is so easy.
There's so much news. Okay, well.
Every single one of these things. I tweeted about this days ago and everyone was, it's a very effective media strategy. Just do more shit, right?
There's more UFO news and nobody cares.
No one cares.
It's crazy.
One day the UFO news, everyone's going to wake up and start caring at one point, but
maybe not.
Maybe not. It does raise, and obviously this week we have to talk about DeepSeek and its ripple effects throughout Silicon Valley, Wall Street, and so on and so forth. But I also think, Sam, you had an interesting point about what all this news does to news. Do you remember this point?
I have so many points.
This is when I just bring up past conversations we've had over the last 7 days.
You mean his point about Trump and why he won? Just that there are certain people who are just extraordinary in this news environment.
It was more like what even constitutes news, and this idea that there's so much, and you kind of know that if you need to know, you'll find it.
Oh, you mean our hot tub conversation?
Our hot tub conversation, yes. I wasn't going to bring the entire More or Less, community into our hot tub conversation, but since you've
pool house, hot tub, what's the difference?
But this is, so I was asking Sam, I was just doing user research for the information as I do, and, asking about his readership behaviors. And I kind of find this sometimes too, I'm the bar for digging into an article, right? And reading anything on the internet, soup to nuts that's long, is very, very high, which has been the case forever. But there's this other thing that kind of going on, which is you don't always feel like you have to read something in the moment, because if you need to get the backstory on it, the information about it, you can do it. And we can connect this because I think this is actually largely how I felt about the early hours of the DeepSeek story. But Sam, am I summarizing that correctly?
Well, I think what I was saying is the way, if you think about a newspaper, like a physical newspaper, the way news used to work, every morning you'd wake up and you'd load state. Right? You'd kind of get your download from the server, right? And you load it locally. I'm I'm going to read the newspaper, I'm going to read all the sections I care about, and I'm going to live my life with this updated view of the world, right? And that kind of would be the whole point. It was your daily drip, right? And you'd store locally. Now it's like you're constantly connected. And so what you want is obviously to be aware broadly of what's going on. But you know that if you ever actually have to really understand a situation, you can easily just like go pull real time what you need to understand the situation. So there's a lot of things going on, especially in the Trump administration with these EOs, et cetera. You're like, I don't actually need to care about any of these, right? I need to casually be aware. It's almost like you get kind of like, it's almost like, you know, it is like downloading the thumbnails. Like I need the thumbnail of all these things in like a sentence. But then again, I don't have to cache any of it locally because I can just go grab it if it becomes actually important or relevant. And I know that 95% of the time it's not going to matter. And so I need to keep it out of my brain, right? So it's just like a very different consumption pattern versus like the way things work in a scarce pipe environment. And, you know, again, I think it's just about the flow of information or bits and how it changes given the way the world works now. Now, I think what's interesting is when you say it's easy, the drip, 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 or the just give me the diff. Like, I don't need the whole thing. Just give me like a small diff on everything. And the question is, like, oh shit, this is now important. I actually need to understand it, whether it's DeepSeek or whatever. You still have this problem is like, where do you go to actually understand it? Right. Like, and I think that's a really important question. Like, okay, I actually need the content now. Like now I actually need a trusted source and this now matters, but you just have to accept that most of the time it doesn't.
Yeah. So that's why I think, I mean, this is profound implications for a news subscription business. Subscription is the right model because you're selling access. You know, it's not, this is why like micropayments don't make any sense, right? It's not about any one piece of content. It's about trusted access to the answer when you need it.
Well, it's two things. I think it's trusting that someone or 100 people or 1,000 people are actually spending their entire lives understanding all this shit to send me the right diffs in bite sizes that I want. And then two, it's when I actually give a shit, which is rarely, but it does happen. I need to be able to go and be like, okay, download me. Right. Like, and like, who do I trust to do that well and completely with high trust? And so they're just two different behaviors. They both rely fundamentally on trust. But I think that's kind of the way I look at it. And I do think for what it's worth, you know, I'm a big believer that people misunderstand. A lot of technologists in particular, I like shitting on technologists, is like people who, you know, went to Stanford and did CS and have no economics, real footing or sociology or things like that. The pure CS people, they think of all these things as pure technology problems, and they're not. They're actually economics problems and social economics problems.
Thank God some of us have economics degrees.
Yeah, some of us actually, you know.
I took two classes.
One of them was on like medieval economics with me, though, wasn't it? That one wasn't so relevant.
No, that if you count that was 3. I took Act 10. I took a globalization one, and then I took that one. But that was it. Those 3 courses.
It's all you need.
Was enough to get me hired at the Wall Street Journal in the econ department. So, but Dave, what is have you noticed any interesting changes in your news consumption behavior?
Well, so I've been doing this experiment for the last 3 to 4 weeks. I just fully quit social media. I've deleted it entirely.
Is that why you now text me beautiful pictures of Jackson Hole instead of post them on Instagram?
Yes.
I love it.
But wait, you tweeted. I saw you tweet for like the first time ever. Does that not count?
No. So Sam, to your point, actually, my consumption pattern has been, you know, going to the trusted news sources that I trust, such as The Information and very few others, as well as seeing what bubbles up to me through the conversations in my life, right? And that's been very interesting, you know, both on the true, what one would define as information on the one hand, and then on the other hand, what we define as pop culture corner around here, which is that there are things that are not just pop culture. They're like weird internet mimetic corner stuff that's going on, right? And people explain that to me now. It's actually, I find, a quite delightful way to experience what's going on. And it made me think about, and I actually wrote an essay about this, which I put on Medium, but I haven't published more broadly. I was just seeing how it...
Did you put something on Medium in the last 7 days?
Yeah.
Wow. How is it over there?
It's very quiet. I just wanted to do a test, frankly, to see. I have a lot of followers there, and so I was just testing what, if any, distribution is still left. Turns out there's none. But the thing that I've been thinking about is the nature of parasocial relationships in social media, in that the people have, famously, I built a social network around this idea that you have 100, the human brain has the ability to manage 150 stable human relationships. And my theory is that social media takes up a bunch of those slots with people that are non-human.
With characters.
Yeah. People, Sam, that I think you've rightly pointed out, play friend professionally.
Yeah. They're really good at it.
They're non-human as in they're bots?
No, they're people who play friend professionally, which we now call creators or influencers, right?
Got it.
And
yeah.
to Sam's also earlier point, these are people who put out a lot of content. They're just constantly putting out content. Most of it doesn't matter. And occasionally it does matter, but most of the time it doesn't, right? Because the zone is just flooded with content all of the time. And so my theory has been that if you take up a bunch of the spots in your mind with people who aren't your real friends, then when you go off into the real world looking for your real friends, you're going to wonder where they are. And so I think that the thing going on where people are saying there's a loneliness epidemic is not exactly what people are saying. I think it's a parasocial epidemic.
Ooh, I like this.
Is this the essay? I'm going to have to remember my Medium login.
Well, maybe I'll give it to you to put in the information.
Love it. We have a whole forum you can put it to.
Yeah, totally. And I've just been kind of testing it myself to see how it goes. And so I went through the entire Trump, inauguration and that entire time period without being on social media. And I'll have to say, it's been quite delightful. I feel very calm. I feel like I understand what's going on. And up until, to your point, Sam, a couple of these executive orders and then this DeepSeek thing, I did not really have to DeepSeek very much information. I've been able to, I think, keep my diff relatively stable. I understand what's going on. And I've even gotten into reading a couple of books, and one of them was your recommendation, Sam. I've been reading The Last Kings of Shanghai, which is amazing.
Pretty good, right?
Yeah.
I also just finished at 3 a.m. last night because I couldn't sleep. The nuclear war book, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
Do you know about this one?
It turns out it's not a great book to read when you're trying to fall asleep.
Well, no wonder you were up until 3 a.m.
No, I woke up. But yeah. Dave, I quite like this theory.
Sam, are you going to quit social media?
No, I love social media.
Okay.
But I also I am in the rare category of I write on social media. I don't read. So I don't really consume social media as much as just publish into it. But which is not how most people treat it. I just, I really give very few fucks what other people say.
Well, I think, Sam, maybe I'm shifting to that.
You consume a lot too. You send me a lot of things you've seen on Instagram and Reels.
Oh, I do. Every once in a while, I do. It's true. Do a little Instagram meme session and quite enjoy that. But that's just pure. That's instead of television. That's not there's no social to that. That's just television.
Yeah, I've had to ask Britt to screenshot things and send them to me instead, which is quite funny.
No, I like this. And, I will say, I think we got to give a shout out to the original non-news consumer, which is our dear friend, my old co-founder.
Wait, Dave is not a non-news consumer. He's a non-social media consumer. He's still reading the information. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. But my absolute favorite is Andrew Cortina.
Ah, yes, Cortina.
Cortina, founder of Venmo, one of my co-founders, dearest friend, just one of the great humans of the world. And it was always shocking to me that you'd talk about something that was a major deal in the world. And this is one of the smartest people, incredibly insightful. And he just would have no idea what was happening in the world on a major news topic. Because he's it's not relevant. I'll figure it out if it becomes relevant.
Yeah. Okay. It's hard to pivot that into a news podcast, but here we will. No. Okay. So everyone who's listening obviously knows that the news of the week has been the Chinese AI company DeepSeek releasing a model that claims to have been trained with a fraction of the compute power in a fraction of the time as all the major models. And I know you guys have thoughts on this.
I just think my number one thought on this is, as with most things, as Jessica dies with a cough, is look, we continue to live in a world where the most likely thing to happen is the most entertaining. This is like the most entertaining thing that could possibly happen on every level. It's entertaining because of the money fires that have been lit. It's entertaining because just as you're shitting down TikTok, the Chinese are like, not just Redbook, but how about you have some DeepSeek? It's entertaining because the people who made it run an algorithmic hedge fund. So
it's so insane.
I dearly hope that they were shorting the shit out of Nvidia, and that was the entire monetization strategy, because one of the great money grabs in the history of the world.
No question.
And it just keeps getting more entertaining, because now all these AI people, what are they calling it? They're all pissed off that like they're claiming that like it was lifted out of their model. What are they calling this now? There's a funny word distillation.
Oh, that's new.
Well, this is so funny, Dave, because they're like, you distilled our models to make your model. And you're like, you distilled the entire internet to build your thing.
Yeah, totally.
You can't be mad that it's turtles all the way down, guys. It's like, you can't, like, in some ways it's like, how do you think the New York Times feels? It's like the same story, just recursed.
That's so funny. It's funny you say that. I literally in the back channel almost put turtles all the way down. Like, this stuff is so ridiculous.
It's turtles all the way down. And it's like, guys, I do actually agree that this whole, like, again, the economics of this is not about the technology. The economics of it are fascinating, right? Because you're like, okay, we care about the real world being in sync with the digital world. Like, reality in theory matters unless it's purely about attention. How do you get that? How do you build that pump? How do you build the economics and the retribution functions and like make it a valuable thing to be trustworthy in this world of layer on layer on layer on layer of technology and abstraction? But it is super funny, right? That like you have this thing where like, oh, you want to have it both ways. So you think it's okay to break the economics of the underlying internet you're leveraging, but then you're mad that someone's doing it to you.
Well, there's a lot to unpack it. Well, Dave, what was your high level reaction? And then we'll go deeper.
I mean, my high level reaction was, okay, let me get this straight. A Chinese company, a hedge fund, releases a new model, makes a bunch of claims about the money and the chips and compute that went into it. There was no real verification that any of this was true. Okay. Like, we have to Sam's point, there's no first party verification. There is a paper, but we don't know if it's accurate. We don't know anything about the pipeline that they use it. We don't know where they got any of it.
Well, they did open source some real innovation, but yes, but keep going.
Sure, they did. But there's a lot of other variables that are obscured here and have not been verified. And the American markets, to, I think, at least some of our surprise, take these claims at face value and summarily lose $1 trillion.
But we know this is like, it should not be shocking to any of our listeners or us. Like, everything is just meme driven. If all of your value is driven by memes and the memes shift on you, it's all just made up.
I mean, yeah, Sam, to your point, the whole time this was going down, I'm just like, wow, Sam, you're right. Our last episode was completely right. Like, here we are in the meme economy moving $1 trillion. And so the thing that kept running in my mind as this was all going down is, do they even need TikTok to hurt us? They just need memes.
Well, yeah, but the TikTok's a great meme machine.
Sure, but like, they didn't even need it. Like,
yeah.
Like, this is like COVID as a meme or something. Like, all China needed to do is release the right meme.
Oh, that also happened this week, right? The CIA finally thinks it's a lab leak theory. Yeah, that was also this week.
So China's been proven to be able to release the exact right press release that can, damage the world, damage the American economy.
Look, it's meme warfare is what we're in. It's meme warfare. It's meme economy.
Shouldn't we be good at this? We're good at memes. But I want to go back to like...
These are big memes. I think there's a difference between small memes and big memes. These are big ones.
Well, okay, but can I make one other point then before we pivot, which is I think there's this really interesting thing going on about pure memes versus memes that rely or are tied to reality, right? So, okay, and it's a really interesting spectrum of value. It's like the ultimate meme is the Messiah, right? The Messiah, and like it's an incredible meme, right? Like, everyone believes in the Messiah. It's like really hard to falsify.
So define meme.
It's a thing that is valuable or true because it's a coordination value. It's like the value. A meme is a thing that everyone agrees to believe, and that belief grows, and its value is that everyone believes it, whether or not it's totally disconnected from reality.
Yeah.
So like, there's this meme spectrum where like probably the most powerful meme in history is the Messiah.
Yeah, Jesus.
And it's great because it's unfalsifiable and you can always push it out into the future, right? And so, in fact, all the cults that try to say, well, the Messiah is coming on this date and they're wrong, they fall apart because they try to tie pure belief to a date or to a thing that's real, and then it falls apart. Like Mars is a meme that you can keep pushing out, right? We're going to Mars. Great. Let's all get behind it. It's a kind of an irrefutable meme.
Do memes ever intersect with reality?
Well, this is the thing. They do. They do. And like, and actually are the other end of the spectrum, if you think about like things that are very close in that aren't memes, it's like there's like gap accounting, right? It's like a story as much as anything else. And it's a story that demonstrates financial health, but it's very intersected with reality, right? Like it's hard. You can't push it out. You can't believe it just for the sake of belief. Like there's grounding. And so what ends up being really interesting is these.
But that's just saying like everything with a consensus is a meme.
Well, I'm saying the value is in the consensus in our like disconnected, crazy economy where like, we no longer have to feed ourselves.
Daylight savings time meme.
Yeah. Or COVID lockdowns.
So then this is middle ground of meme, which I think is what happened with DeepSeek, right? Which is like, the value of AI is AGI meme. Like it's not like it loses a shit of money, but it's like it's okay because like AGI, right? It's very memetically driven. But the problem is that like it's a very binary 0 or infinity value. And so it's extremely susceptible to like news stories or memes that come in to the picture or facts. And that's why you see this like it's a very fragile value, right? That's because it's not actually a super strong fully disconnected meme like the Messiah.
It's a great point.
And so like there's this, I think it's a very dangerous place to be, is to be like a meme that has too much connectivity or basically is like too referential to the outside world, because then you're susceptible to things like DeepSeek or swerves, right? And it like collapses the whole thing.
I like this as another way to define in a more subtle way what drives bubble behavior, right? Like bubbles, bubbles in financial markets are what you described, Sam. But like the way you're describing, kind of unpacking it, is another way to think about, are we in a bubble environment right now? Like are the assets that are driving the largest amount of market cap susceptible to this sort of hybrid meme type?
Right. And I think it's just interesting because like there's this thing, and you go back to like the Messiah as like the greatest meme ever, is like Bitcoin. I'd argue Bitcoin is way out the curve on memes in terms of being, because it's so disconnected from from anything, right? Like there are a few, it's not fully disconnected. Like there are a few things that connect it. And as it gets more correlated with risk on assets in terms of its movements, in some ways the problem is you have this like pure thought meme that's getting like pulled into reality, and that becomes a dangerous spot for it to exist in to some degree.
Sam, a lot of people would use, and I think that you're not doing this, but a lot of people would use meme as in almost a negative connotation, right? It's a meme stock. There's not an underlying, but I mean, you revere Bitcoin and you're saying it's a meme. So what's the...
Well, I think it's very powerful. I mean, yeah, go ahead, Dave.
No, I think, Jess, you're right. Meme is a verb, meme is a noun, meme has multiple definitions as a noun, right? And multiple definitions as a verb, right? Like you're right. A meme, you can use it in a negative, derogatory way in that way, but it is a very, important fundamental building block of information theory as well.
I'd also put it this way, which is, to be in Silicon Valley for a second, I actually think there's like lots of reasons why we should be worried about memes, right? Because they are just there's no fundamental reality to them or meaning in them, right? They're literally just communities that you're front running if you're trying to invest in memes, for instance. And because there's no fundamental value or grounding, the value is only supply and demand driven and belief driven. They should be quite fragile. Now, the thing that I think is changing or different is twofold. One is, more and more, our society, the way we store value, what we do, is like so disconnected from fundamental reality. And that's bad, like in a lot of ways. But like,
you mean all of society, or I think people would agree with like Wall Street, but you mean broad in there?
I just think like you live in a world like you don't grow your own food, right? When when COVID happens, the government just like prints a bunch of money. Like, I think you have this, like, none of us work on real things. We like push bits around the internet. Like, we're so disconnected from like the underlying reality of existence and like feeding ourselves just because we're so layered up the stack that I think people, like, in a lot of ways, I think memes are a lot of like how people think about value and store value and interact with each other. Now you can talk about this as like a post scarcity thing. Like, we don't have to be concerned with reality because like the food supply war. You can also say it's super dangerous because people are getting completely disconnected from fundamental reality. But there is just this, we're so abstracted, it feels like memes are actually a big part of the story.
Sam, I don't know why, but this just made me think about, is it the result of deep consolidation at the top of or the bottom of the stack, right? Like many of the products that you reference that people interact with every day in the grocery stores, for example, are really only manufactured by, a very small number of, the General Mills, the Johnson and Johnsons, the big conglomerate companies. And so they have a deep incentive to actually abstract people as far away from the mothership as possible in order to continue to drive market cap. And like, is that part of what's going on? And so consumers are then using, it's like mimetic warfare on both ends.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure. I always worry about like ascribing intent to these things versus just like systems outcomes.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like the system, I'm not actually trying to ascribe intent. I'm trying to point out the system and how the system is structured, and then therefore is this part of the outcome.
Yeah, I just think yes, I think it's part. I think it's just the natural like abstractions on abstractions on abstractions to the point that most of us are just like typing queries into ChatGPT as jobs, right? And calling or like making content. Like, we're just so far away that it's really understandable why everything just becomes stories and narratives and like front running those, whatever those end up being, right? And so I just think it's like worth acknowledging that that's where we are with a lot of this stuff, and then thinking about how those things interact, those stories interact, and where they're susceptible to being popped or not, or and how thinking about all of a sudden investing in things as narratives and the strength of the narrative and the velocity of the narrative, and kind of the angles that would destroy the narrative as much as anything else.
There's a really good example of this that happened this week. I think that I don't know that everybody's paying attention to it because I haven't seen it covered, in I guess what you would call mainstream or sort of mainstream.
It might be on social media, Dave, but we don't know because you're not there.
It's not. I mean, it is on social media to some extent on X, but the founder of Vine launched a token on Solana this week, and the idea was bring Vine back.
And if you forgot, Vine was a short video service.
Yeah, short video service that had a lot of love. It was built in the early 2010s.
It's where the Paul brothers come from.
Yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Was it the one where you live streamed, or that was Periscope?
No, that was Periscope.
Okay.
Vine was a short video service like YouTube.
It was TikTok.
Yeah, it was TikTok before TikTok. And so the founder, who's a very talented product guy, decided to launch a meme coin last week on Pump.fun, which builds meme coins on top of Solana. And, in a day's time, it went from 0 to, it ended the day somewhere in the 250 million to 300 million market cap. And it's been bobbling around all week, and it's now, it dropped down to something like, I don't know, 100 million again. But it's back up today to 316 million market cap. And so to your point, Sam, this is a meme driven by the idea of bringing Vine back. And, that has a market value of today, 300 million.
Kind of.
Yeah.
I'm curious and then I want to actually talk about DeepSeek's technology and some of the other issues it raises. But are we at peak meme coin? Are we not even scratching the surface on meme? Okay. So where are we going with meme coins? I mean, my social media feed is all people I know and friends who were saying, this meme coin was started in my likeness and it's not me. Don't fall for it.
Oh, I saw that. That was, God, what's his name?
Andrew Ross Sorkin.
Andrew Ross Sorkin.
But also Ivanka Trump. I don't know Ivanka, but yes.
I saw that from Andrew Ross Sorkin, and I replied and I said, "This is a very brilliant way to launch your meme coin."
Exactly. The best way to launch a meme coin is to tell everyone that it's not my meme coin.
It's not my meme coin.
But why do you guys both agree, that this, like, why do you think we're only scratching the surface here? What is the meme coin landscape going to look like a year from now?
I think a few things. Like, one is just, I think that the economy is just going to be dominated more and more by these like hyper abstractions, right? And they're getting easier and easier and cheaper to like launch and interact with. They're going to move faster and faster. And look, it's just a different way to speak. It's just money is just, a form of communication. Like, value is just a form of communication, right? This is Hayek 101, right? And so I just think like there's no reason in a frictionless environment you wouldn't see like a massive proliferation of currencies and way to express viewpoints and that's one. Two is the actual economic value and like framework for why people do these is like pretty rational, right? Which is effectively, if you think about how do you get rich in the world, you want to be first into a community, right? And front run it, right? You want to be there at the start. Now, we've talked about startups were certainly like that. Like, there's all sorts of things that like fit this model, but in general, like, there's like a really weird thing that happened. Like, take startups, like something we all believe is probably accretive in the world. If you think about how the way startups work, the first like 100 employees make an unbelievable amount of money if it goes well on future value that they did not generate, right? Like, and that's just because they were first, right? And like, effectively the way markets value things is on like momentum in the future, right? And so just by being first, you get paid really well, right? And like on the future of other people's work. I think that's the same thing with these memes and communities, which is there's no way to like earn your way into the upper class anymore, right? Into wealth. Like, it is not mathematically possible. The way to do it
through income,
right? The only way to do it is to make highly asymmetric bets with your time, right? Or with your capital. With small amounts, because the asymmetry is so enormous that being first on important trends. So I think there's just like this massive incentive to really follow these things and drive them in various ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Sam, when all of us were coming up in Silicon Valley, the only way to make those asymmetric bets was with your time and getting equity in, early stage startups like, in my case, in your case, Facebook, and then others. And today, this is kind of, meme coins to me are the natural evolution of what's been going on through the internet since the beginning of the internet, right? Like, we've seen each iteration of the internet, each iteration of internet applications, you've seen more ways to fund and join into these early, communities, like Sam says. And, in the last wave, it was Kickstarter, it was Patreon. Like, that was how you funded creators. That was how you funded the new product that's sitting on your kitchen counter, right? And the exchange back then was just, I'm paying for this thing up front. It was like, I'm paying for the inventory of this new thing that's going to sit on my counter by giving the product creator the ability to understand what his future orders might look like. But I didn't get any equity ownership in the thing. And to me, what the meme coin thing represents is now the natural evolution that the crypto economy has gone through, which actually is kind of where it started, Sam. Like, if you remember back when we were first doing crypto, and we started doing a lot of that L1 chain investing in this 15, 16, 17 phase, one of the first things that happened back then was this concept of an ICO, right? And, most people in crypto remember the ICOs, but I think the layperson in Silicon Valley is probably forgotten that ICOs, or initial coin offerings, were actually one of the original kind of first use ideas.
But they were riddled with scams.
They were 100%. And so are meme coins, right?
Well, so is like most of the economy. Like, I think that's
absolutely
again, like, you think about, like, let's talk about, you can go as far back as you want. We can talk about the funding of fiber and the collapse on that, or the collapse of the railroad, and the what was that? You can talk about, early Silicon Valley or early tech startups and the IPO craze in the 2000s, whereas they basically were meme coins, right?
100%. I guess the difference being, though, in my point around, Kickstarter, is that now it's as easy as the click of a button and the connecting of a wallet, right, to jump in on one of these things, and it's become ever better because of the work of the crypto community. And I also noticed last week that Brian Armstrong tweeted that there's now 1 million new tokens created every week. It's not feasible. I mean, it's really not feasible for him or anyone to evaluate every single one for a listing, right? Which has kind of been the regime we've been under for the last 10 years, where we've trusted people like Coinbase to be kind of the app store of coins, and they trust and regulate, or they don't regulate, but they vet everything. Everything inside the marketplace is vetted by them. But we're now getting to internet scale on this thing where 1 million coins a week, like there's no way anybody can regulate this. And so
AI can regulate it.
What was Coinbase doing to try and
they only let certain coins on the platform.
Well, look, there's a spectrum, and I think this is important to think about and talk about, which is like a lot of this also has to do with the rise of retail investing, right? And kind of how people are managing money. Because if you think about it, the reason, you already have this, like the reason that MicroStrategy stock exists, right, is because there's a lot of fund managers, right, who would love to invest in Bitcoin, but it's just too fucking painful for them to deal with it with their funds. And so MicroStrategy is just this hack for them to invest in a thing that looks like a company and smells like it's an abstraction. But like, honestly, they're like taking a hit on a relative basis, or they're trying to juice their returns, but we can talk into that. But like the basic point is like, you don't, Fidelity is not going to list random ass meme coins, right? Because their framework and their risk rewards just don't match with that. But the retail investor kid, like the legacy of GME, right, who's like, look, I make even a lot of money. I make $250,000 a year after taxes. Within where things are, I'm not getting ahead, right? The only way I can do that, I can get anywhere, is to effectively front run memes. I understand that most of them are zeros. They're expected value negative, but they're so deeply asymmetric that it's fine, right? And like that's kind of driving a lot of kind of this thing, and a lot of it's just background radiation in the universe. Like a lot of it's absolutely, there's no value in it. It's just stories people are trading, but some of it won't be, right? And I think that'll be the real question. Wall Street, the professionals be super snooty and point out the fact that most of it's just background radiation noise that's meaningless, but I also think a lot of innovation can come out of that. So
yeah, and I think, Jess, the answer to your question, brass tacks answer, is that you probably end up in a situation where you have to choose what the default is, right? The devil's in the defaults. In email, right, we shifted from, in the early days, anybody could send an email into any inbox, right, in SMTP. And then as time went on, there became a block list or a spam, sort of a global spam consortium, right, that everybody kind of works on and helps each other block all the spam, right? A lot of crypto wallets are starting to do this. Phantom's doing a good job with this. Several of the wallets are doing this. And it seems like that's also where Brian Armstrong and the Coinbase guys want to go. They want to see a block list rather than sort of your default out, now your default in, but if you mess around, you're blocked, right? And so something like that could work. I don't know.
The Coinbase thing is also really complicated, though, because here's the thing.
Okay. And then we're going to move to the next topic.
So Coinbase has a real like business problem here, right? Which is the way you trade these things is on dexes and a lot of things which are not Coinbase, right? And because they've had to be regulatorily compliant, because they have institutional clients, because they're trying to be on top of this stuff, because they have to play nice with the regulators, and they're not actually part of like the true decentralized internet, they're just a gateway to it. They're kind of in this pretty awkward position, right? Which is that they're getting cut out of more and more of like what's actually happening in crypto. And so that's, I think, the other thing you just note is like this is a strategic problem for them, that so much energy and background radiation is happening outside of them, and they really can't play because of how they've set themselves up. So I think what Brian's trying to do is retrench a little bit and say, like, we want a piece of this too, because otherwise, it's not that they're not good. I mean, they're great at custody, they're great for the institutions. That's a lot of the value, but they are definitely getting cut out of the game.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, Jess, on your question of what does a year from now look like, based on what David Sachs is saying, in terms of where the crypto conversation is going, I mean, he delineated on CNBC this week at least 3 different categories of crypto assets, crypto categories, right? Digital assets that are commodities, digital assets that are securities, and then assets that are collectibles. And so if the regulatory regime is going to move in that direction, then you've got a totally different, three different set of tax regimes, three different ways of thinking about what can move in and out of these classes, which is a very different point of view than we were in just 3 months ago, right? And so you could see a world a year from now where things like what happened with Vine are much more part of the early stage, startup ecosystem. You could see things like ICOs. You could see a much more liquid market appearing for startup equity, for example, that is, rides on crypto rails. Like that's a thing that seems like you could squint at and see happening a year from now. It could also not go that way.
Yeah, it could be as someone though who spent I love the hard asset story and the liquidity story. I've always loved it. Montana Landau, like I'm into it. But going back to our thing about memes and how they're valuable as pure fiction versus tied to reality, I think there's another way to look at it, right? Which is that all of these, anything that in crypto is tied to anything other than its self-referential community is liable to whatever it's tied to. So it's a really interesting question, right? Actually, of where the ecosystem actually tends. Does it tend more towards more digital, more pure belief, right? More pure community driven? Or does it try to like hitch its wagon to the real world, which has some value, right, in terms of stabilization, but also creates vectors where it can be undermined, right? Because all of a sudden it's not pure Messiah. It's like a proxy for equity, which is kind of a real thing.
Yeah, no question. But let's say there are three categories, Sam, right? Securities, commodities, and collectibles, right? And that collectibles become a real new category. It's an interesting question what investing in that category looks like a year from now.
So, and look, this is a great debate to have offline and at some other point, but like, I'm still very skeptical of the collectibles. I feel like collectibles are just weak communities.
Well, but he's not categorizing. This isn't just NFTs. This is NFTs and meme coins, right?
I don't think meme coins are collectibles.
Well, that's how he categorized it, in this conversation. So
doesn't mean that's the right way to categorize it.
Sure. For the sake of this conversation, I'm putting meme coins in that third category.
There's a difference. And I actually think I was thinking about this recently. In some ways, I think what collectibles are is they're weak pre-internet communities. So take like watches, right? Like there was a bubble in like fancy watch collecting, right? You're like, what is that? Like, why do you care? Like, it's just why does anyone care? And it's like, well, there is this kind of like offline world that values watches. They're not super integrated. It's not like a super freight trainy, like growing community, but it's a lot of rich people that kind of value watches. And I just feel like the real communities that are going to be the real meme drivers, the real stories are so much higher velocity, right? Than like baseball cards or collectibles in the physical world. And I actually think the nature of community is like much higher velocity than being like, there's 1,000 made up NFTs of whatever. And like, you can have one and be a member of it. Because that false scarcity actually fights against the fundamental properties of like of a high velocity community.
Totally agree. But I would argue that meme coins are actually the opposite, which is that you buy a meme coin to become part of a community. And by buying into that community, you make the community more valuable.
Right.
And I think there's a different dynamic. I think they're both like, you could argue that they're both similar, but different for those two reasons, but kind of belong in the same category because the meme coin doesn't have like you said, it's not tied to an underlying asset that has totally different rules, right? Like it is digital only. So that's kind of the question that I'm wondering is like, does all of it end up in this third bucket? Maybe you're right, it splits into two. Nonetheless, what is investing in this as an early stage investor look like a year from now? I think is a very real question.
I just think it's like embracing this idea of like pure narrative as an investable asset class. Right?
I mean, yeah, it's really, we talked about this last week. It all goes back to GameStop. Or I mean, it does way before, but.
Yeah, GameStop I think will be looked back on as an incredibly important cultural moment.
Yes. Okay. Can we talk a little bit about getting a little into the AI weeds where I know both of you love to be because you love this technology so much, but maybe Dave, like one of the reasons that DeepSeek set off alarm bells was what it claimed to have done around scaling and decreasing the cost of scaling and so on and so forth. And there have been a lot of questions around that. I mean, from I think what our team, the information's gathered, it's like yeah, there's some, looks like some great developments on things of like cutting out some steps in the reinforcement learning process, being efficient about engineering and so forth. But I'm curious as like a technologist, what you made of their claims about, and then also what you think that means for like what we're going to see over the next 12, 24 months in these models.
Well, I think that for, I don't know, a year or more, we've been talking about this idea that AI is the tale of two cities, right? There's this tale. One tale is what Sam was mentioning earlier, and we've been talking about quite a bit, which is that there's this AGI vision and these massive clouds and these, hyperscalers, and we're going to spend whatever, $1 trillion to build a data center, and the big model world, right? And that's one story. The other story is the story of small models, right? And can you make these things more efficient, make them run more locally on, on high performance devices that are on your desk or in your pocket? And one of my favorite things that I saw in the last, 48 hours is somebody took, I think, 7 Mac Minis and linked them together. I think running on M2s, not M4s. So we're not even talking fully state of the art Apple silicon. And with 7 M2s, they were able to get DeepSeek's open source model up and running at pretty high performance, just running on their desktop, right? And so to me, what this shows is that the thing that we've been talking about here on the pod for, a year is true, right? Like you're going to see innovation in both directions. And that's the thing to me that was also sort of strange. Like, why did the market lose $1 trillion in value overnight if this was a thing that most good technologists have been thinking about both of these things happening, and that the march towards smaller models, smaller on device models, smaller on desktop models, smaller on premise models, being faster, better, high performance was going to happen at the same time as OpenAI and the big guys continuing to make this a massively commodity game in that zone. Both of those things were going to happen. And then the third thing I would say is that Jess, I think it was you that was talking about on the pod along maybe like a year ago that there were these meetings going on with Chinese entrepreneurs trying to figure out how to get access to H100s and, that they were going to do things offshore and, or they were going to get tons of the Nvidia chips that they could get access to and figure out how to do it with those. Like, don't put it past Chinese engineering ingenuity. I mean, it's one of the greatest engineering countries on earth, right? Like, anybody worth their salt thought that China was going to figure something out, right? So that's why I'm having a really hard time grokking what happened to the market here, because to me, all of this seemed obvious.
Can I try to explain?
Go for
what
it.
happened in the market? Or Jess, do you want to jump in first?
Go for it.
So I agree that there's tale of two cities about what the impact is of LLMs and AI, right? Broadly. And the thing I've always been saying is like, look, it's great for the mom and pops. It's great for small businesses. You're going to get a ton of efficiency. And like, we can kind of go down the line of all the reasons that like, yeah, it's good. There's like more efficiency, more EBITDA, life is good. Then there's the hyperscalers, right? And I would argue that for the last year, the story of hyperscalers has been something along the lines of there's no moat in AI except for a huge pile of cash. Like the moat is money, right? And if you can basically insulate yourself with a huge flaming pile of money, then no one else can do it, right? And that means there's like 4 companies in the world that can do it, right? It's mostly companies that are profitable enough to do it without a ton of investment, and 1 or 2 incredible storytellers, Sam Altman being one of them, they're just like, able to fight the game not with profits, but with just like charisma, right? Where they're able to like, sell the story to investors, which is a challenging story to sell, but sold nonetheless. But the problem with DeepSeek is it indicates a direction towards total commoditization, which means that your flaming money defense does not work, right? And it will just be everywhere.
But even that, Sam, I feel like that's been something we've been talking about.
No, we've been talking about it, but I think I think there's a lot of people who said, I want to own AI. How do I own the AI at the lowest level? It's power and it's Nvidia. Because they're like, well, we don't know how to bet on AI, but we just bet on that layer.
Well, that was one of the most fascinating things. Not only did Nvidia tank, but like energy companies tanked.
Right. Because you had all these people that were just like, I know that this is important. I have no idea how to bet on it. I'm going to bet at this low level that I'm sure wins no matter what happens. I actually think a lot of what's happened with the Meta stock in the last week is people rotating into Meta as effectively their safest possible AI bet.
Well, Sam, so unpack this, because this is also, there are so many conundrums, but the fact that Mark keeps talking about spending more and more money and the stock goes up.
Well, yeah, I did find it funny. Mark talked about spending a lot of money, stock went up. DeepSeek comes out, everything goes down, but Meta goes up, right? Then like Mark talks about spending more money and stock goes up. So it is kind of funny. It's like anything AI oriented makes Meta stock go up.
Which to me suggests there's a deep unsophistication, or basically a deeply unsophisticated actors in the market that really don't understand this technology.
Well, obviously that's true, Dave. But like,
but isn't their job to go become analysts and learn and actually become competent?
Well, some people are smart. Like I think like Apple stock went up on DeepSeek, which makes sense, right? That makes sense. So like there's some smart actors, but like for me, the Meta story is it's like in the perfect position. They have no liability around this stuff because they're not Google. They have no search business. Like they have the perfect use case for AI, right? Which is optimizing ads and attention. Like that's what the newsfeed already does. This just like hypercharges it and hypercharges the ad market. And then the really interesting part is they kind of win either way, because if it takes a ton of energy and takes a ton of compute and they are a hyperscaler. They have the money to do it. And Mark keeps indicating they're serious about it. Great. If it turns out that it's super cheap and everyone does it, the first thing they're going to do it for is to plug it into the ads API systems at Meta to make Meta more money. And so I actually think it's like the perfectly hedged position to be in, where like heads you win, tails you win in that scenario. And so people are being pretty rational about it. Now, the nice part is Mark says I'm going to spend $100 gajillion on this stuff. If it turns out he doesn't have to, he doesn't have to.
He doesn't have to. But I mean, this is also what we've been talking about with Meta in general, right? And the genius of the open source strategy here in the first place, right? And it, to me, like this DeepSeek thing is exactly what we were talking about. That by releasing Llama, DeepSeek surely used it, and many others, sounds like, and the fruits of that win come back to Meta like overnight, right? And they can plug it back in and make more money.
Everyone and their mother is looking around for hard assets they can buy with AI leverage. Like this is the investor's favorite narrative ever right now.
But how is it a win-win for Meta if they spend a bunch of money on something that it turns out they didn't need to spend it on?
Because it doesn't really matter what they spend on these things. Like it's first of all,
say more.
Well, $100 billion. Honestly, it's a 1.7 to almost $2 trillion company. It's actually kind of a rounding error, right? So it sounds like a big number. It's actually not. It's a very cheap defense budget.
And Mark's also developed a brand of being like, I'm going to spend big money on this, right? And then, oh, I've reevaluated it. Now I'm not going to, and everything's okay.
Information headline this week, Reality Labs has been reorged and is now under the COO of Meta. So I think that's actually, in terms of sneaking your news in, but streamlining what was once
it's no longer under the CTO.
Well, no, it sort of is. I think the operations piece was moved. But it sounds like a streamlining measure, if I've ever heard of one.
So, Dave, I'm sure growing up you played StarCraft.
Yeah, of course.
Jess, you probably didn't. It was a great game.
No.
And one of the lessons of Warcraft 2 and StarCraft is if you were going to go to battle, there are two ways to do it. One, you could like build a good army, right, slowly, and then be good at the battle. The other is you just got like a ton of miners and just built such a strong economy that you could just swamp all the other players, because like every time your siege tanks got destroyed, you just already be building 50 new siege tanks. And so that's, I actually think what's going on with Meta right now is like they have such an amazing profit factory that like it doesn't matter if they spend a bunch of siege tanks to their death, right? Like the $100 billion is like irrelevant. They'll generate that again next year, right? And so I think that's why in some ways, like, sure, you don't get your tiny dividend. Sure, the company's worth 5% less in theory, except for the company doesn't really get valued on profits. And this goes back to what we started talking about, which is memes, right? Like everything is a meme, right? Profit is just a demonstration of discipline in operations, right? And I actually think that puts Meta in this incredibly inventive position. You actually can spend like $100 billion on something and it just does not matter.
Is America a meme right now?
It was certainly full of memes. I think there's a lot of memes.
No, but I was just looking, like Mark kicked off his earnings call with a tribute to America.
That's awesome. Did he like have a flag? Was it like saluting the flag?
I don't know. I didn't see any wake surfing in it, but
if earnings calls start with a pledge of allegiance, we'll know we're in a new place.
Oh my fucking God, yeah.
Instead of a land acknowledgement, you start every earnings call with a pledge of allegiance.
Wow. Okay. Yes. We could do that. But we shouldn't do that.
Why not?
Because we don't need to pledge allegiance to have the earnings call. The earnings call should be efficient.
You don't need to pledge allegiance to have a high school assembly, but you still do that, or used to.
I can't say I've been in a lot of high school assemblies recently. Okay, so is there any lingering outstanding question about DeepSeek that you all are curious about?
Well, I'm a little confused. It's very slow right now. I feel like it's very swamped.
It must be. I mean, I doubt they were ready for this, right?
I think what's actually interesting is I just wonder if they have to start charging, not for because they have to, but for load management.
Well, this is the thing, right? So DeepSeek, like they are losing a ton of money, but they're just losing a little bit less money than everyone else is losing because
it's fine. They made so much money on their Nvidia trade. It's irrelevant.
I mean, who knows? There are a lot of questions.
Jess, one of the things you asked was, is there anything interesting about their technical approach? And the one thing in reading the papers that I thought was interesting, they do have this one part of one of the papers that talks about a unified paradigm around reinforcement learning, which is pretty cool. They've got a very beautiful piece of math that kind of brings together all these different fine-tuning and optimization techniques into a single equation. And it seems like that's actually of all the things that people believe is beautiful about what they did, that equation is one of them. It's section 5.2.
What do you think this guy, there's conflicting theories on what this does to open source. Obviously, the open source people say it shows the power and value and incredible dominance of open source. The proprietary folks says it shows the weaknesses of open source.
Wait, what is the weakness that they're implying?
How easy it is to copy.
Yeah, but I don't know. The entire I would argue that that's just a misunderstanding of open source. I mean, literally the entire internet runs on open source. It runs on Linux. Every Facebook was built on MySQL databases. Like, I mean, you name it. Like the software people interact with every day, including the Mac operating systems you're using to, we're using to talk to each other, are filled with open source, right? Like, it's like the operating system of the planet at this point. It's not like you can put it back in the bag.
Can I also just say, I think it's ridiculous. Like, so what actually can be proprietary? I would argue that a supply chain kind of can, right? Like you could lock in suppliers, you can create like a next, like there are ways I can imagine that you have, like Apple has like a pretty proprietary supply chain. Fine. I believe that obviously you can have companies with a user base that they've locked in, right? But I don't believe that technology can be proprietary. It's too easy to copy and too easy to steal. So if anything, I would actually argue that a lot of the idea that like you're going to get proprietary software that or algorithms that like no one else can possibly figure out, I just don't think that like history bears that out. Like I think someone will at anywhere from steal it to just reverse engineer it. And so if anything, I just think that like it's a fool's errand to think about your software as some sort of secret sauce. You have to think about like the business leverage or some other thing that you can defend. But software is never a moat. And so to me, I think there's obviously a spectrum to this, right? And like you can try to protect a little bit of what you're doing on the edge. But look, OpenAI has got to be crawling with spies. Got to be, right? And so they can be as close as they want, but I promise you everyone has copies that cares, right, of what they're doing.
Fascinating. Okay. As I'm really losing my voice, is there anything else you guys want to discuss? Any other thing that caught your fancy?
Guys, Mythic Quest is back.
We got to we're going to watch it hopefully tonight.
I want to see, I've heard about the Mick. The Mick sounds great. That's from the woman from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Mm.
I got Am I a Racist? That sounds great. It's a movie.
Sam's really giving us his to-watch list. Okay, yeah.
DeepSeek told me about this thing, which sounds great, called Trailer Park Boys. I told it that I liked it. I think this is actually a fabulous recommendation. So DeepSeek, I asked it for recommendations for TV shows based on my love of AP Bio, and it immediately gave me It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. That's correct. And then number 3 was like Trailer Park Boys.
That's hilarious.
It's great, but it's an awesome recommendation. But then I will tell you the funniest thing it did, and this goes into the hallucination case, is I told it I love Ricochet robots and to recommend board games to me. And it started out pretty strong. And then its last recommendation was a game called Ricochet Rockets. And I was like, they're like, it's a sequel to Ricochet Robots. And I'm like, I Googled, I was like, I don't think that exists. And I was like, DeepSeek, like, this game doesn't seem to exist? And like, it really dug in. It's like, no, Ricochet Rockets is a game. And it like gave me this long explanation about Ricochet Rockets. So I will say there's some hallucination going on, at least in terms of board games.
Okay. Well, yeah, great. Good board games, good TV Rex.
ChatGPT, by the way, immediately told me that Ricochet Rockets was not a game. So that's 1 point for ChatGPT.
Sam, as an AI skeptic, you spend a lot of time with AI, which isn't contradictory. It's just, you
have to know thine enemy.
No, I actually thought I need to take a week off to use all the AI out there and formulate opinions. If anyone wants to go on this AI binge with me, I'm not going to take a week off, but I should do it.
You know what I want to do? I want to hire someone that when I have a question, I email them and they ask all the AIs and then synthesize the answer for me. I need a human AI proxy assistant.
Why?
So there's too many AIs and you're asking them all this shit. I need you to be like, I don't want to fucking type the same thing 4 times. I'm going to be like, dude, woman, VA, here's my question over email. And they can, fax me back the answer after they've asked the AIs. I don't want to read these things.
Okay. Well, to the listeners, thank you for joining us for this ride down meme coin lane, among other things. We always we begin with the news, but end up somewhere very different. But I suppose that is the charm of the More or Less pod. Thank you guys, please, for listening to my horrible voice, and please share widely. Dave, send our love to Britt.
You did great, Jess. Sounds like you and Britt have the same thing.
It's...
What is this thing? It's got everyone.
I don't know, but we will power on. And I am sure that it is but the middle of the week. More headlines will emerge. So thank you all, and we'll see you again next week for another More or Less.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this show, please leave us a virtual high five by rating it and reviewing it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Find more information about each episode in the show notes and follow us on social media by searching for @MoreOrLess, @DaveMorin, @Lesson, @JLesson, and as for me, I'm @Brit. See you guys next time.